Guys, today we're going to be reviewing the final shape Warlock exotics. These are the Mataiodoxia chest piece and the oh so sexy Speaker's Sight helmet. Today we're going to be breaking down each of these exotic pieces, their functionality, the possible synergies. Timestamps are also going to be here. Keep in mind, this is a pre-release build, so things are subject to change, but at the same time, fundamentally these exotics should perform the way you see here. Now let's start with the Speaker's Sight. This one's intriguing for so many reasons. It's literally the Speaker's Mask. It comes with the perk, the Lost Voice. Its description reads that healing grenades will spawn a restorative turret. Healing allies occasionally spawns an orb of power. Now, there's nothing else hidden here. Our healing nades turn into literally healing turrets as soon as they hit the ground. And yes, this turret is exactly the same as the one that spawns from our Warlock class glaive Edge of Intent. Now, once the turret is spawned, it will shoot out a little healing seeker about every 3 seconds. Now, when the Seeker reaches someone, it will grant them ×1 cure. It will also give them restoration ×1 for 4 seconds. Now, the turret will repeat this until it disappears, with its total duration being about 15 seconds. There's really nothing else to dive into about this exotic. It's pretty straightforward. It does exactly what it says. The only thing we didn't really sit down and test was like, okay, how does this affect my allies? I'm assuming it's gonna proc things like Ember Benevolence, but that second part of the perk is pretty interesting. That one right there, healing allies occasionally spawns an orb of power. Now, this is distinctly separated from the restorative turret, which leads me to believe that this will occur from any source of healing. So whether it's a ripped healing turret, cure from Red Death, heal clip from a variety of different legendary weapons, this right here could potentially proc this second part of this perk, therefore creating an orb of power. And depending on the cooldown for something like this, that can be substantial. Now, I know I mentioned Ember Benevolence, and that's probably going to synergize here with this exotic, but keep in mind, the reason why you don't see me using Ember Benevolence is because Benevolence isn't present on our prismatic classes. And I love Benevolence, but I'm pretty sure most of us are going to be rocking Prismatic since it's going to be the new hotness at the launch of the final shape. With that being said though, Prismatic will have access to healing grenades, which is another way to dip into the synergy here for the Speaker's Sight helmet. Now, other things that will synergize on Prismatic with Speaker's Sight are Fragment's Light Facet of Hope, where we get increased class ability regeneration when we have a buff applied to us, of which both cure and restoration count. So as long as we've got a turret healing, we should have this fragment procced pretty much at all times. The second fragment that synergizes here is Facet of Sacrifice, which literally falls in line with this helmet. It states that while you have an Arc, Solar, or Void buff, ability Final Blows grant bonus Darkness Transcendence energy. Now this, with the uptime on cure and restoration, means we should be able to get lots of extra progress to our darkness meter. Again, we don't know the exact percentages off of this, and I was just testing this on the fly. But I know everyone's going to be asking, why this exotic over something like Boots of the Assembler? And how does it synergize with things like Lumina? There's definitely things I need to be testing more in depth when we get the exotic next week, but that's a fair question. Keep in mind though, Boots of the Assembler, although it does synergize fantastically with things like Lumina, it requires you to sit in your rift. Whereas this, you just deploy the grenade and it just does its job with healing. The other thing is, can it double stack with Edge of Intent? Can I put down 2 restoration turrets and just go full-blown healing? Maybe do that in combination with either Red Death or even the healing auto rifle and just go full-blown healing. And throughout this entire process, I'm raining orbs. Worst case scenario, this exotic is just gonna sit in your vault, but you'll pull it out simply for the drip. Best case scenario though, it allows us to truly be the ultimate healer on our fire teams. Now, the next exotic, and the one that really grabbed our attention when Bungie first teased it, is Mataiodoxia. This is the second ever strand-specific exotic. And we finally have something that builds a bit more into one of the coolest melees in the entire game. And I'm saying this as a Titan main. Don't get me wrong, I love punching things, but Arcane Needle is one of the greatest animations. Mataiodoxia has the perk Stylostixis, and I know I'm probably killing that name, but this bad baby has a huge essay of a description. It says, targets damaged by Arcane Needle emits a suspending detonation when defeated, and landing multiple Arcane Needles on the same target immediately triggers a larger, more powerful detonation. Now, defeating suspended targets grants melee energy. But wait, there's more. Your Arcane Needles are strong against barrier champions. So literally, a way to counter barriers. Now, looking at the suspend kills, it's really nothing too crazy. We got a pretty standard size suspend explosion here, very similar to that of like Weaver's Trance and its suspending detonation. The great thing here though is that you just need to damage them with an arcane needle. You don't actually need to kill them with the melee. Once you deal damage with arcane needle, they'll get this marker that indicates that once they die, they're going to suspend everything around them. And of course, as you've been seeing, if you do outright kill with the melee, the suspend still goes off. And the next part of the perk is where we could trigger a suspending detonation by multiple arcane needles, which does have us using 3. Now, I had hoped it was only going to be 2, but as you see here on this wizard, when it gets hit by the 3rd needle, that's when that much larger explosion goes off. Now, continuing with the rest of the perk's functionality, we also get melee energy when defeating suspended targets. Now, this looks to be about 20%. So you can imagine if you're like in an ad-dense encounter, like here on the Imuna, the regeneration stacks up very quickly. And then finally, the last piece of this exotic, which feels like it has a million moving parts, is the ability to pierce barrier shields. I couldn't get footage of this, so I'm not sure how many needles it takes. Hopefully, though, it's just 1. But the fact that you can counter barrier champions and suspend counters unstoppable champions, you pretty much have 2 in 1 right here with this exotic. Now I want to look at some of the synergy we have here with Mataiodoxia, with both Strand and Prismatic. First with Strand, this exotic pairs so nicely with things like Weaver's Trance from the Mind Spun Invocation aspect, as well as the Wanderer. Both of these acts as a way to suspend enemies. Weaver's Trance is on any kill while the buff is active, and the Wanderer suspends enemies with tangles. Now, if you run these with Mataiodoxia, you've got so many different sources of suspend, making it, in my opinion, the best way to suspend enemies in the game. And the way I used this synergy was to have both of my aspects as a way to re-up my melee charges. If everything is being suspended, then every kill is giving me 20% melee energy back. And it really felt like I had all my melee charges at all times. And you can even go deeper by using the Thread of Mind fragment that gives you class ability energy when killing suspended targets, or Thread of Fury, which gives you 10 to 25% of your melee energy when just dealing damage with your tangle, depending on the enemy tier. Pair that with the Wanderer from earlier, and you're essentially double dipping on melee regeneration. Now, I know most of us are probably going to be playing with Prismatic, which we actually have a ton of fragments that take full advantage here. We've got Facet of Bravery, which says that defeating targets with power melee final blows grants unraveling rounds to your strand weapons. Now, considering the easy melee regeneration we have here, this is going to be very often. We've got Facet of Courage, which will cause our Arc, Solar, and Void abilities to deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. Essentially, we could chuck a needle, causing unravel, and then immediately have increased damage with, say, a Storm Grenade or Nova Bomb or whatever. And the next fragment I'm going to be looking at is Facet of Dawn, which state that power melee hits against targets makes you radiant. Power melee final blows make you and nearby allies radiant. Now, with our Arcane Needle and with the high uptime we have here with this exotic, it's pretty much going to be on-demand radiance whenever you need it. And this is especially important considering A, we're losing artifact mods from this season, which pretty much gave us free radiant whenever we needed, and B, we're not on a typical solar subclass. So having melees readily available to dip into this to grant us Radiant is going to be extremely helpful. Now, the last other thing I want to mention is Facet of Devotion. This states that defeating targets afflicted with stasis or strand debuffs grant bonus light transcendence energy. Now, with this, it sounds like we could probably fill up our light transcendence bar without even needing a light damage type. And this dips directly into what we're doing here with our melee by running around, unraveling things, as well as suspending. You could see the synergy here. We've got a number of options, guys, when it comes to building into Mataiodoxia. But both of these exotics we'll be looking at in more depth when we have our hands on them. Now, let me just say, when I was playing with them, I enjoyed them, but it wasn't like game breaking. I wasn't like, oh my God, I needed this exotic. I'm hoping when we get them in the live game, though, we're going to start seeing some other synergies, some other plays with them. We could possibly double stack killing turrets with Speaker Sight. And you never know. We may be in a situation where we need someone dedicated to healing. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.